Okay, yeah, I bought it. Look, I've actually bought Invisible Touch. I'm sure I walked around HMV 3 times over the last 20 years holding the CD, thinking, yeah, I better get it. I'll get it. It's cheap. It's like $6.99 or something.
It's not cheap.
I didn't. But yeah, because we have an HMV, it has come back. So I like to go to HMV, and there's not much to buy really, unless you want to buy vinyl. So I got it. I finally bought it. Yeah.
Should have got it on vinyl, Kev.
It's 20 quid. No, 23. New stuff is 20 quid. Stuff like this, 23.99. Big albums, 29.99 for the records of an album. It's only 40 minutes long. As I've said, I think this is the worst album. 96% like this album on Google. I don't think that's a useful statistic. I think it's only people who've searched for it can click on whether they like it or not. So that's a social media thing, isn't it? In the bubble of terrible later Genesis albums, it's a good one. Something happened between 83 and 86. Okay, that's the thing. Phil became too famous. Live Aid happened. Genesis didn't play Live Aid because obviously it was 85, so it was a Phil year. Mike and the Mechanics is now a thing.
They're still touring, aren't they?
Yes, forever.
I saw an interview with Mike Rutherford this week talking about his in the.
Oh God! Because you know I bought the archive compilation where it's solo stuff and Genesis stuff, and I think I've already said this. Did I already say this? Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's got the solo stuff is quite interesting. Which songs they've chosen? They've chosen their own 3. Each 5 members gets 3 songs, so it is interesting which ones they chose. But the Mike and the Mechanics song, which is the Over My Shoulder song, in my head I thought, well, it'll be like Invisible Touch, or I don't mind that stuff. It's all right. It's horrible, awful. It's so music. It's actual music. He's dead inside. So yeah, the self-titled album had this creativity in it, but it opened up to a broader market. It's got this sort of aggression to it. It's like heaviness. This is not the right word, but for Genesis, which isn't very Genesis. That's gone, and they were cashing in, obviously, not unreasonably. Well, I'm sure Mike Rutherford thought, well, I better form a band then and keep touring and keep going forever. This is the outcome of that 83 to 86. It's the sequel to Abacab. It's nothing like Genesis. In the same way, Abacab is very contemporary for 1981. This is very contemporary of 1986. Ugh. I feel dirty touching it. The sound is totally different to the previous album. It's very produced. It doesn't sound like a band. It sounds like effects. And the vocals don't sound real. They sound like an affected vocal. Not very live. The songs sound completely different live. They actually sing them in a different key. I think it was too high for Phil at this point. And this is it's kind of. I mean, we're doing there's 2 more studio albums to go. The creative spark isn't there. The Genesis isn't there on this one. It is there on every other album, I think. But remember, yeah, as I said before, this is the only Genesis album that came out. The owner of the fan club played it once and played frisbee with it. So he likes it now, but there is something wrong. They're too famous, and it's 1986, and it sucks.
How am I going to get through this? Okay. So, first off the bat, I can't believe I'm actually touching it. Invisible Touch. This is a great album to review because it's shit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's the best kind of review.
Yeah. So I think the first 3 songs are quite big singles for them.
Yeah.
Invisible Touch, Tonight, 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 and Land of Confusion.
And Throwing It All Away, and even anything she does because they've run out of songs. And they're so famous they just keep putting singles out.
So there are earworms on this album. And when you say earworms, I am, of course, referring to the larvae from the Seti eel from the Wrath of Khan.
Yes, like in the Wrath of Khan, yeah.
Yeah, the ones that... the ones that burrow into your ear and wrap themselves around your cerebral cortex, causing extreme pain.
Yes, the 80s is good.
And rendering the host extremely susceptible to outside suggestion. So, yeah, this is a perfect 80s MTV generation album.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest with you, Kev. I would rather grow a pair of testicles on my chin and get into a uppercut competition with Lennox Lewis than listen to this again. It is
execrable.
Not going to egg very well, I don't think. I don't know what Asperger's syndrome is, but I think this is it.
That's what like the world's like. So you've got to have a bit of, there you go. I've got good, understanding.
Yeah. Of course, we shouldn't diminish what Asperger's is. It's an actual real thing.
It, yeah.
No, Asperger's is a real thing that has real effects on people. This is just a
dead album,
endless pit of tedium, basically. So, where do we start? Well, the first song, the opening song, the title song, "Invisible Touch."
And touch hand.
It's such a strange way of saying it. It reminds me of have you seen the Howard Stern movie Private Parts?
I don't know actually.
It's actually all right. There's a bit where he goes to WNBC and they're teaching him the call letters. He goes WNBC. It kind of reminds me of that invisible touch sort of thing. So invisible touch is the kite mark of banality, and it is the high point on the album. And it just descends into a cavernous pit of yawn from that point. What can I say? It was a couple of albums ago that I actually bought their own studio. Yeah. So you buy your own studio, and then you start making music that you could make on a PA system in some dingy supermarket back office.
Buy some instruments from Argus.
Yeah. Press a few buttons. Oh, we got a song.
Just get the what was the Rolf Harris?
Yeah, what was that called? That was like a 60s thing, wasn't it?
Stylophone?
Yeah. Well, we shouldn't talk about Rolf Harris.
No.
Very controversial figure. So the next section on my notes is called psychological trauma. And this is sort of, I think there's a personal hatred from me. But basically, you remember, Kev, you'll remember this.
The 80s.
There was a teacher in middle school who I think you said still there, yeah?
Till very recently, I think. About 2 years ago she left, yeah.
Right, okay, so she taught us. And basically what she used to do, she used to play Phil Collins music at us because she was really into Phil Collins, as if it gave us sort of like some kind of veneer of her personality.
Why? What was she? That's just impenetrable, isn't it? What does that mean? Why are you doing that? Nothing.
Yeah. This teacher had a pathological hatred of me. I don't know what it was. I think it was sort of like she decided she could see the spark of youth in my eyes, my natural inquisitiveness, my natural joy with the world, she could see me with my quest for
religion, truth, and happiness.
A meaningful life, and she decided she had to stamp it out.
Extinguish it immediately.
She's like the teacher in if you don't eat your meat, how can you have your pudding? Well, she's like that without the pudding. She's just
not an entertaining voice or scary or anything like that.
Yeah.
Just dead.
It's just remorseless colouring in and detention. I'm pretty sure from that experience that teachers go through some kind of screening process, and I'm pretty sure she was banned from teaching in a high school because it would just end up in sort of like alt-right manifestos, shotguns and body counts. Because
in the US it would, yeah.
Yeah.
It would, yeah. She wouldn't get. She was only still there because she got in when she did. She wouldn't get in now. That's probably why she's at the same school, I would think, because it's got a strict thing now. Yeah. Everyone's leaving because it's so hard.
I know someone's just left. It is remorseless, the bullcrap they have to put up with. Anyway, so maybe I'm over-egging it a bit. Maybe Freud would have said, well, maybe you've invented a pathology there, Sam, because actually you really, really loved her and you are trying to explain the rejection.
She helped you through.
Yeah.
She guided you and you never realised.
Which is obviously complete crap. What I wanted to do is get beyond colouring in and actually get into some kind of depth. something, you know.
You wanted to learn stuff.
I wanted to learn stuff.
Even if it's canal boats.
Which is...
Don't want to colour one in. I want to learn about them.
Yeah. Which is quite a good metaphor for this album, actually, because it is all surface. There is no depth, which is what you expect from
the Genesis is gone.
Yeah.
Genesis is not on the album.
Yeah. Do you know, she said something really weird to my mum and dad, that teacher, at one of the parents' evenings. She said, he's like my fiancé. He's naturally bright, but he's got no discipline. Don't you think that's a really weird to say about a student?
Massively telling, though, isn't it? She's obviously projecting.
Yeah, I mean, and let's face it, you know, she's a middle school teacher. She's not curing cancer here. I mean, the teacher is a worthwhile job, yeah, but it's not like something to get snooty about.
Yeah.
It's something to be proud of, but, you know, not...
She was snooty, yeah.
There's a bit of a...
I'm a teacher, hello.
Yeah.
I know someone, right? I can't talk about work, we know that, but I can say this, right? There is someone who has a number plate, a car number plate saying teacher. I can't say any more than that, but that's enough.
Flipping it, do you want to get egged at the weekend or what?
Don't worry, you won't be watching this. It's fine. It's only for Patreon anyway.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Is that what I like?
So what is actually wrong with it? So,
Everything.
Yeah, it's a bit like Phil Collins, I think some chicken after midnight, a metamorphosized...
84.
Yeah.
83. Probably 84. 83.
He metamorphosized into some kind of weird Uber singer, singing everything but nothing at the same time. And the music, you know, consumed Fantasia. Do you know what I'm referring to there?
Not really.
Never ending story. Nothing. Yeah. I'm trying to. When I was thinking about it, I was trying to think, well, who would. Do you remember what the wolf was called? You know, the evil wolf is called Gmork. Who is the wolf in this metaphor? I'm trying to think if it's Tony Banks. Don't know.
This is the thing, okay? I've tried to be consistent about this because we've been quite unkind about Tony Banks, right? But it is his fault, okay? The Lamb is his fault as well. That's the thing, yeah? The same three people wrote and played on the majority of that album as this album, with one very, very pushy character who was the band leader.
Yeah. So we start with a very, very gifted drummer, unique drummer, almost irreplaceable.
My second favourite drummer.
Yeah, and he takes over the band. This is an amazing thing. You know, we've got a incredibly talented drummer taking over a band. What can they possibly do? And he ends up with a drum machine.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. What?
What? It's like getting Milton to write TV adverts. You know, it's just.
It's what's his name? Unicron. He ended up having to do adverts for wine. Oh, it's lovely wine. What's his name? The epically awesome actor who's in Citizen Kane.
Orson Welles.
Yeah, Orson Welles. That's it. You know, he had to, you know, because his career went right down the pan.
Yeah.
And famously he had to do some adverts for some wine or something, and there's the outtakes. It's really, really dark. That he keeps having to redo these takes of trying to go, oh, lovely wine.
Oh God.
Yeah. Except imagine that. Except it's much more successful and famous than Citizen Kane. That's what he's famous for. Going, oh, lovely wine.
So I mean, devil's advocate, yeah, you could say, well, okay, this is just a product of its time. This is where music was.
Very much so.
But I think that's a little bit, well, you know, there are all sorts of things happen at all sorts of times. That doesn't excuse them. Mm-hmm. So if you've, I don't know if we've talked about the Stanley Milgram experiment. It's sort of like a go-to thing for me because it is genuinely shocking. If you've never heard of it, go on the internet And
that's not the Big Brother.
No, it's the one where they get an experimenter in and they tell him there's a person in another room hooked up to some electrodes.
Oh yeah.
And if you ask them a question, if they get it wrong, you give them an electric shock. Yeah. And there's a dial, and you keep turning the dial up.
Yeah.
The more questions they get wrong, the bigger the electric shock. And there's a mark on the dial which says certain, death, caution, death, sort of thing. And the experiment is to see how far someone will go if an authority figure just tells them to carry on.
Yeah.
You look it up and see what the results are. It is terrifying, yeah? So it's actually the minority that don't go all the way, basically.
Yes.
And Genesis should be the minority, yeah.
It's supposed to be.
But this is them going with the majority.
Yes.
And, 80s music has set the pattern for everything that has occurred now. So Simon Cowell, you can trace it back to the 80s.
Yes.
And this.
Yes.
And the only thing that you can say about this album is, well, at least they had spitting image puppets in one of the videos.
Yeah, get the song. The video's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to almost say exactly the same thing. In the 80s, we always excuse bands. We say, well, it is the 80s. But with Genesis, we don't. And actually...
It's because we expect more of them.
Is it because they led the way? It's their fault.
It could be.
They're so big by this point that people are... because this is 86, not 87, 88. That happened in 86, 87, 88, and 89, That people thought, oh, that was, number one everywhere. 5 singles in the chart from this album at once. Their biggest album. And it is the worst album.
Typical, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. I do think they led the way. And you think about it, we say, oh, the 80s. Lots of great things happened in the first half of the 80s. Really, the 80s, it's the second half of the 80s. There's some good heavy metal. That's it. Yeah. Now, you don't need to list bands, thank you, in the comment section. It sucked. It just sucked, okay? 86 to 89. 92, really. Sucked. It was awful. Bad music. I don't do Pinterest images.
Just pictures, yeah. But it's sort of like mood boards and that.
Yeah. Part of the problem is Domino. I have said I will listen to any Genesis album, and I will listen to this album, but very, very rarely. Domino is where the Genesis-ness should be. You've got Anything She Does, which is that. I mean, Anything She Does is the trolling song. It's supposed to be terrible, like in Illegal Alien and all that, and Who Done It. But it isn't even that. It's just a nothing. That should be on a solo album by one of them. It doesn't matter which one. But Domino is the epic. It's a 2-part thing. It has Genesis tropes in there, but it just never worked for me. It just feels like bits and pieces. It works better on the album than live, but I think that's just because the rest of the album's not as good, so you don't mind so much. But on a live album, oh, it's bloody Domino now again. All those live albums, and so many live versions of Domino instead of, you think in 2007 they played it again. They could have played. That's so official releases. We had 2 more versions of Domino. Instead, they could have played Silver Rainbow. They could have played One for the Vine, or I can understand them not going that far back, but for God's sake, it's just bits and pieces. Land of Confusion, like I said, is a good song. It is much better live. It's the 80s effects. It's the it sounds horrible, and obviously live they had to use a band to play it, so it sounded better. And the video's great. Pope on bass. Apparently they had to cut down the Pope on bass because it would offend. They're not maximising their viewer base. But you've got Ronald Reagan's Nurse and Nuke buttons, which turns out wasn't that far from the truth. There you go. Title track is all right. It's a song, and it's a catchy song. I don't think I get through it. I think when it gets to the bit, I just press skip. And then I press skip again, because Tonight is noxious and horrible. In Too Deep, nothing. Throwing It All Away, catchy tune. probably the best catchy tune. It's probably that and Land of Confusion. And the Brazilian is a keyboardy thing, so that the Brazilian has value because it's a keyboardy thing. Unfortunately, in 1986, a keyboardy thing is turn up that treble. You know, yeah. Phil wanted to do more structured pieces by putting bits of jams together. So they're doing lots of jams, and Phil started saying, "Right, let's put these together into big pieces." And the other two were like, "Oh no, we don't do. We want to do that. No, we want short songs, don't we? Don't we?" So, that suggests to me Phil was unaware. Phil's just making music. He doesn't know what's going on around him. The other two are thinking, "Ka-ching." Phil's very successful right now, isn't he? Let's do that. And they had a drum machine for all of it right until the end. The drums were played last. There's not that much drums on here. I mean, there's an awful lot of drum machine. Yeah, like I said, it's annoying that they keep playing Domino. There's so many versions of it available now. It's boring.
Well, that's their justification for calling it a Genesis album, isn't it?
Yes. It doesn't mean they have to keep playing the bloody thing. God. You know, I always agreed with the. You know, like, I think that when people will complain, it's the comedy booing about playing new songs, and Tony Banks said he'd rather just play songs from the current album than the previous album. And yeah, quite right. Of course they should. It's the new stuff. But in 2007, there wasn't any new stuff.
Yeah. And
they still had an old medley with it in the cage and whatever in it, and they still played Domino and blah blah. Why didn't they do an old medley of all the songs from their famous album? Maybe, you know, then you can just skip it all. Obviously, to be fair, they weren't thinking about They were thinking about the shows, not an album. The fact that an album came out was an inevitability. But it is Phil that is different. I think he sounds different. Like the live sound and all that now sounds like this fake produced sound. It doesn't sound like a real human being. The humanity has been taken out, and I think anything that's good, anything that's good came from Phil and Tony Banks. I think, apart from obviously Land of Confusion was written by Mark Rutherford, but those jams are the two of them, Phil improvising vocals and Tony Banks improvising chords and melodies. Anything good in there came from that, I'm sure, because they were just doing what they do, Yeah, it is 2 eggs. It is not 3 eggs. It is 2 eggs.
Flipping heck, Kev. It's a 1 egg album. If you can give something 0 eggs, I'll give it 0 eggs. Can you give it 0 eggs? Is that allowed?
No, 1 is the bottom.
1 egg.
It's the worst album.
1 egg. 1 very gone off egg.
It's a bit mouldy. And I bought it with money. I wasted money. Oh, it's a digital remaster and stereo mix.
Maybe we should give it away in a competition.
No, the only reason for owning it is collection, complete collection of albums now. That's the only reason I own it. There's no other reason to own it, is there? Especially if I already know it. There we go. Done.
We've done Invisible Touch.
We have done the 80s.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. That is a good thing. It's not, maybe. I Can't Dance is next.
Right then. Do you want more coffee?
Please.
Yeah, me.